Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Archives and History Library. Hi, Ms. James. We're awfully glad that you came out this evening. This is the first of the 2015 block lecture series. I don't know if you've been to, I see familiar faces, so I think most of you attended some of our lecture series last year. We have about 25 lectures each year and have some outstanding speakers, and certainly we're fortunate enough to have one this evening. I do want to note that a couple of upcoming speakers. On June the 2nd, which is on a Tuesday, we'll have Rory Perry here. He was the clerk of the Supreme Court, and he'll be talking about the history of the Supreme Court, so that ought to be very interesting. On June the 18th, John Lilly, some of you remember John, who just retired from Golden Seal magazine. He's going to be doing a presentation on West Virginia songs, so that's on June 18th. And then on the 25th, we have Mr. Newsom, Mr. Ronald W. Newsom, who will be our second speaker of the block lecture series. I just want to note a couple of things, and I apologize for taking up your time. In just a second, I'll introduce the man who's going to introduce you to the man who's going to introduce you to the speaker. It's kind of like a political rally. But I did want to note a couple of things. First of all, we are very interested here at Archives in History in preserving, of course, the history of West Virginia. But in particular, in the last couple of years, we've been very fortunate in taking in some materials relating to the African American community in Charleston. In particular, we took in the Hardin and Hardin funeral home records. I see Mr. Battle back there. They were stored down at Simpson. Those have been transferred, and we actually created an alphabetical list of all of those persons. So that's a very helpful thing. And I put both of these things on the top of our website in case you wanted to look for them. If you do a search on West Virginia history, Archives and History should be first to come up. The other collection, I want to thank Ms. James certainly for her role in getting the Norman family collection. We have not only John C. Norman, who was one of the first black architects in West Virginia. We not only have his architectural drawings that are scanned and available online, but we recently took in papers relating to Dr. Norman, who is, of course, a world-renowned pioneering heart surgeon, and his mother, Mrs. Ruth Norman, who most of you know, I'm sure, and probably taught you many lessons in terms of grammar and that type thing. But we're very blessed to have these materials here. I have a finding aid for the Norman collection, also digitized a lot of letters, a lot of photographs from that collection that you can view online. So I urge you to look at these, but I also urge you, look into your closets or wherever it might be. You might not consider those World War II letters or that program from the Women's Club meeting to be important, but we do. We do want to collect things relating to the history of West Virginians. So anyway, without further ado, certainly I want to thank this fella I'm about to introduce, Anthony Kinzer, who's the director of the Center for African American Art and Culture. Mr. Kinzer came to us last year and talked about this block lecture series. He had been involved in working with us in creating those 2 highway historical markers you see down there for the block, which are wonderful additions to the neighborhood. But he was very anxious to do a speaker series featuring prominent West Virginians from the block. And so he really took this on. We've worked together, and I'm very thankful that he, for all that he's done to preserve our history. So, Anthony Kinzer.
Thank you so much, Joe Geiger and the West Virginia Archives and History. And I also want to thank members of Garnet High School and the individuals who grew up in the area that have these lasting memories that not only I, but everyone in the world should know about them. Younger individuals should look at you guys and learn what you endured, what you learned, and what you've put to use by what you've learned. And preachers, I think, don't know that they're a preacher until they're hit by something from God, and then they become who they are. And they say, God's been working with me for a long time. I just wouldn't let him make me into who I am now. Well, I say that because Garnet closed in 1956, and that's the year I was born. And I think that that legacy was passed on to me. And I didn't know it then, but I'm finding out the more that I do, that everything I do has a connection with Garnet, has a connection with the block area, has a connection with the history that exists there. And you have that history that I want to record, that I want to preserve, and that I want to share with everyone that I can. So if you continue helping me with your pictures, your photographs, your memories, I'm forever grateful to you and everything that I can do to make that happen. I'm blessed to have the Block Speaker Series going on. We, the West Virginia Center for African American Art and Culture, are a 501c3 organization. And I want to thank board members that are here tonight, Ms. Chlorine Carter, Councilman, newly elected, Cubert Smith. I want you to think about Casey James in your prayers. He's been sick lately. Also think about Dr. Fred Barkey. And I want to thank also one of the other board members who was a speaker last year, Ms. Barbara Lacey. And of course, a younger guy named Tony Lee. And I want to say something about Joe Tyree, who also has helped me get on the road that I am now. He and Casey took me by the hand and said, this is the way things are. Of course, I moved here from Bluefield in '76, so I didn't know the exact history, but he and Casey, you could say, schooled me on how things were. And thanks to them, we're on the right road now. As Joe Geiger said, we have the historic markers on Shrewsbury Street, one at the hotel at the corner of Washington and Shrewsbury, and one at Simpson Church. And we also have commemorative bricks embedded in the sidewalk along Washington Street that represent the Ferguson, that represent the First Baptist Church, and the Brown Building at the locations that they were at that time. So if you go down Washington Street walking or want to take a look at them, they're representative of the history that exists there as well. I ask your help. If you'd like to make a donation to our organization, we are, as I said, a 501c3 organization. If you'd like to physically be a part of our organization and help us do what we're doing, join in with us. We have a committee called the Northside Historic Community Group, as well as our umbrella organization, the West Virginia Center for African American Art and Culture. And we want to continue what we're doing and make what we're doing long-lasting for a much younger generation. Now, a guy who spoke to us last year, Press Estes, you guys know him very well. I got to know him quite well myself. Very engaging guy, as you all know, and I really do like him. But I tell you what, he knows Mr. Smoot very well, a lot better than I do. And I felt that as the speakers come along during the course of the next 3 months, that there should be someone who has that intimate knowledge of these people that they can share. They were out maybe drinking beer together, or they were out just hanging out on the block and doing things that you should have been doing, but they did it. And whether they want to share their stories or not, that's the way that I want to share that. And so these stories are very, very great, very nice, very nice. And those are stories I want to hear. The way you guys came in today, greeting people, laughing, hugging, reminiscing, those are the memories that are long-lasting and forever will be remembered by me and for you. And I want to maintain that and continue with that. So what I want to do with Press is to call Press forward and have him introduce Mr. Lewis R. Smoot Sr.
contacted and asked if I would introduce Louis Smoot, I said it would be an honor. And later I talked with Louis and I asked him, I said, is there anything that you would like for me to say? He said, not really. Well, it didn't really matter because I was going to say what I wanted to say anyway. But Louis had his early childhood schooling at Boyd Elementary and Junior High School. He spent his childhood life on Shrewsbury Street, next door to the Simpson Memorial United Methodist Church, not far from the Henry Highland Garnet High School, where as an honor graduate, he finished in 1951. Now, Louis enrolled in what most of the people in Columbus, Ohio, refer to head of the school up north, Michigan State University. Louis graduated with a degree in BCEM, Building Construction Management. And after earlier invading the west side and commandeering one of our lovely young ladies, Genevieve Winston, on June the 10th in 1956, they were joined in holy matrimony, holy wedlock, after the conclusion of his graduation ceremony. Now at this union there were 3 children, 3 sons, Louis Jr., Richard, and Stephen. Now, Louis spent time in the military with the Corps of Engineers, and in 1962, Louis was the best man and Jenny the matron of honor at our wedding anniversary. Now, to make sure that I do not have to appear before Judge Mathis on a charge of plagiarism, I coined the phrase of a little-known politician. I give you the chairman of the board of the Smoot Corporation, my brother of another mother, Louis Russell Smoot.
Where's the mic? Oh, you know, after press, you know, what can I say? What can I say? The part that he left out is the fact that we were like brothers because we worked together for a number of years. Press was an executive officer with Smoot until he decided he was going to retire. I don't know what happened. He wouldn't let me retire. So I'm still working there. But very good friend and a very knowledgeable person, and certainly was one of the assets that helped us build the business, along with a number of other people. I don't know where to start. I was told I had 10 questions or 12 questions that were to be answered, and then at that particular time, folks would like to hear a little bit about Smoot Corporation and what we do today. So I'm going to try to follow that as best I can. And as Jenny and I sat at the table and tried to figure this out and to, shall we say the right thing, we found ourselves laughing at some of the things that we did, and we found that we were very blessed to get the wisdom for so many people in this particular area. But the first question was establish an early background of the family. And you've heard this phrase before, it takes a village. I was fortunate. I lived in the village of Charleston and Shrewsbury Street, 611 Shrewsbury Street. And it said, generally, what was the relationship between parents and children alike? The relationship when I grew up between parents and children was you did what you were told to do, and you respected your parents, you respected your neighbors, and you respected your fellow man, and you gave back something. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a doctor. I started at a very early age building things, and I'm probably going to add some things in that are not in order the way maybe Anthony wanted them to be. But the reason I like building, when I was 13 years old, I didn't have a choice to play ball. One of the questions in here said, what did you do in sports? My sport was construction. I didn't have a choice. 13 years old, 5:30 in the morning. Sherman Smoot, bottom of the steps. Hey, boy, time for you to go to work. Let's go. I thought my mother was on my side. When I got downstairs, she had my lunch packed. Dad agreed. He said, we'll have to talk about what you're going to get. I'm going to pay you 50 cents an hour. That's $20 a week. When I got home on Friday, Mother did this. And she gave me $5. She kept 15 and started putting it towards my education. That's what it was like at 611 Shrewsbury Street on that side. The question was asked, did the family eat together? Yes, we ate together. My dad said we always had 3 meals: oatmeal, cornmeal, and miss a meal. That wasn't funny. But my dad liked chicken, and I'm glad I liked the wing because the breast was reserved. When Jenny and I were talking, we recognized the fact that my father was the breadwinner in the house, and my mother was the domestic engineer. She ran everything when he was out of the house because he had to travel a lot. Growing up in Charleston, we didn't have the privilege of being in the union, so we had to go to the non-union jobs to find them. And he traveled as far south as Florida, many jobs in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. But he found my mother in Meadville, Pennsylvania, where I was born. And the question was asked, what is it like when you were growing up in the family? As I said earlier, I did what I was told to do most of the time that they knew about, and sometimes I didn't, and they didn't know about it. And anybody that is sitting in this room can probably say that same thing. But the one thing that we didn't do is we tried not to do anything to embarrass our parents. You know why? Because the FBI was all over Shrewsbury Street, all over Charleston, and they had no problem picking up the phone saying, Betty, you know what Lewis did? And I didn't want them to call my dad. And I'm really getting some of this mixed up, but as it comes to me, if you ever went up Shrewsbury Street, those of you that are of my generation or what's not, we had a switch tree in the yard. You know what those are, don't you? And if I didn't cut it the right length and with the right whip in it, I had to go back and cut another one. And I'm going to tell you one story about what I got whipped for. When my dad used to take us to work in the truck, the back of the truck had a canvas over top of it, and in the wintertime it was very, very hot back there, and I didn't like it at all. But the gathering place was a place called the Cue Ball Inn. Any of you all know where the Cue Ball Inn was? Up on Washington Street. It was directly, if you were on one street over behind New Way Cleaners on Washington Street, it was the Cue Ball Inn. And that was one of the places also we used to go out to eat. But my dad, when we would come home in the evening, before he left, he'd shoot a game of pool. And I always said, I'm going to learn how to shoot pool. And I watched him, and I watched him, and I watched him. And I decided it was time for me to shoot pool. I didn't know, I don't remember exactly what age it was, but it was right here on the block. And Press knows about shooting pool. He was the biggest shark in town, right? And still is to this day, because he uses that as part of his ongoing procedures that he does to stay healthy. But my dad was looking for me because my mother wanted me to do something, and he got in his car and found me at the pool room. I had a bicycle. He told me, he said, be home when I get there and cut me some switches. And we had one of those tubs that had 4 feet on them. You know, they stood about that high. I got stuck trying to get away. He wore me out. It never, ever happened again. I never disobeyed, I don't think, after that, because I know that he meant what he said. We're going to skip to something else. Were you expected to act certain ways around adults? I think we all were acting certain ways around adults. Please, thank you, Mr., Mrs., grandmother, grandfather. And we had more aunts and uncles of people that were close to the family, because that's what you did. It was a village, believe me, it was a village. That village went all the way down to Institute, because after church, which was mandatory, one of the things that we did, if we did not eat at home, we went to his mother's house where the family gathered. And we had that fried chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes, cucumbers, tomatoes, and onions. And the women in the family had baked some pies. While they cleaned up, the men went outside, made a circle around a 5-gallon bucket that had rags in it. And they lit the rags to keep away the mosquitoes. And they talked about what went on in the family during that week or the weeks before. They talked about what was going on in the nation. We sat in the second row, kept our mouths shut, put the chairs back after the meeting was over, and went home. And then we rediscussed it at our house. And the whole idea of that in that family was to know what everybody's doing, know the health and welfare of everybody, but not only in the family, in the extended family where we lived. And of course, as Press will tell you, my dad was an avid reader of anything he could get his hands on, and specifically the newspaper. We'd go in and say, Dad, how are you doing? He said, fine. Did you read the paper today? Yeah, Dad, I read the paper. Did you see the article? Which article are you talking about? You know, in the business section. And finally we'd get to what page and what was it. This little game to say, did you read the paper? Did you stay up on the news? Because if you don't, you're not going to be on top of your game. One of the things that he did to the day that he died. The other thing that he had a tendency to do, when Jenny was late going and visiting, he tested us on the newspaper, but he tested her on the clock. If she said 3 o'clock, he expected you there at 3 o'clock, not 5 after. Punctuality is one of the things that we were taught. Be on time. He said, really, it pays to be about 5 minutes early. You get people's attention that way. How were you disciplined? I told you all, with switch. Also, worse than the switch was the lecture that you had. I see some people say, why don't you just go ahead and beat me? That's how we felt sometimes. And some of the things that our parents and Jenny's mother used to tell her, don't let the lights catch you in the street, meaning that was what time you had to go in. So those are some of the things, Anthony, that we talked about. I was asked the question, what did my dad do for fun? My dad worked all the time. He worked all the time, but he had time to do some things also. I told you about the pool. But Dad liked to travel. Dad traveled all over the world. He was a member of the Construction Specification Institute, and he fought from the time he got in until the time they gave him a certificate for perfect attendance to be able to participate as a voting member in that group, simply because he was not a professional. You see, he was just a bricklayer, a contractor, a business person, but he wasn't professional in that group. Finally, they changed the rules after his persistence. Dad also was a member of many professional organizations, and he believed whatever your work was, whatever organization you could participate in, to make it better, go and participate, and also participate in the community. Anthony, my mother, traveled, bridge, crafts, bowling, and reading also. And her crafts were, each of us, my sister and myself, have 100 Christmas balls that were made out of styrofoam, dressed in sequins and other things that are really priceless today as part of our archives. I think I did this one. How important was sports to you as a child? I said my sport was construction, but I started summer training in 1946. That was when I was 13, and I got the message from downstairs. It was time to go to work. What was your first job and how long was it? My first job, for that 50 cents an hour, I was a water boy. Back then, they drank water out of a galvanized bucket with a galvanized dipper, and you sometimes wondered how those guys who chewed tobacco got that water out of there without getting it dirty, because they rolled their lip under, put the cup underneath of there, and drank the water that way. If something was in that water, it was my fault. After that, I waited tables at the Daniel Boone Hotel. Some of you might know the name Step Preston. Worked at Edgewood Country Club. Some of you may not know I worked at Preston Funeral Home while I was in school. Dad, you know, that used to be Preston Lawson Funeral Home, and Dad and Merle Preston got together after Mr. Lawson was out of the business and formed a business relationship, which later, I think Fifi and her family are taking care of it today. I learned the masonry trade at an early age. In summers, I came home from school. You see, back then there was no vacation in my schedule. I came back, got in here at 11 o'clock on the Iron Horse from Michigan State. My mother sat around and heard some of the college stories and some of the college jokes with me. But in the meantime, 6 o'clock in the morning, I was out with my dad because we had to work. When I was a senior at Michigan State, I really didn't have money. Dad and Mother made it possible for me to have an education. I had to make it possible for myself for whatever spending money I had, which was cleaning dormitories, latrines, the rec hall, and the place where we ate. And I've never seen so many people that could spend money on beer and not keep it down, because I had to clean it up. The guy's shaking his head back there. I know what you're talking about. But anyhow, that was my job, and as a senior, Dad let me borrow one of the trucks, and I went up and started contracting at Michigan State, building patios and garden walls. Because somehow or other I had to get some money. Press talked about 1956. 1956 is when Jenny and I got married. in the chapel at Michigan State. Dad gave me $200 and told me, you got a week off, meet me in Coshocton, Ohio. We got a hospital to build. Guess what? We did the cheapest thing, go to Niagara Falls, come back across the river, come home, and I met him in Coshocton, Ohio. And 2 weeks later, I received a letter from my friends and neighbors. I didn't know anybody on either side. I mean, we had gotten this house and it was a wreck. People had passed on. We cleaned it up, painted it up. We were going to live there. I was drafted into the military at that particular time, brought to Columbus, and sent to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, which was a great experience for me. What I did wrong when I was at Michigan State, you all have heard of ROTC, R-O-T-C. I flunked it. It was at 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't like to get up and walk all the way across campus the first time, never after that. But I only took 2 years of it. Therefore, I didn't go into the military as a second Louis. I went in as a nothing. I didn't have anything on my arm. The guy offered me an opportunity. He said, you go to OCS, give me 3 years, and I'll give you bars on your shoulders. And I said, no, thank you. I got a purple band around my arm anyhow, making me what is known as an acting jack, 3 stripes, sergeant. But I was in charge of operations. And I had a lot of people to deal with because I was responsible to a lieutenant, Knack, who I ended up working for later in Huntington. But it taught me how to deal with people. It gave me a PhD, shall we say, in how to deal with people because there were people from all walks of life, and we were able to get it done. I was with the 168th Engineering Battalion, and we were in direct response to the guys that jump out of airplanes, the 101st Airborne Division. A little bit about the background. I know you wonder what am I going to do with this up here. I told him that I would show some pictures and give you a little background on the company, on where we are. But I would be remiss. Time will not allow you to for me to tell you all the stories I have, but I would be remiss if I didn't say about some things that go on. Folks, I've never left Charleston. There's a group of individuals sitting over here and they don't like it when I do this. From Carson, BBT Carson, but it was Carson Insurance Agency when my dad met them in 1944. At that particular time, along with not being able to be in the union, we couldn't get insurance. Emerson Carson made that happen. And he was followed by Ed Gonch and Greg Gordon. We're still with Carson. All of our insurance in all of those years has been with Charleston. We've also returned in a few years ago back here to do our banking. We used to bank with the National Bank of Commerce, I think. And we bank with BB&T at the present time, because of this contact that we have over there. And they used to say that's what you're supposed to do as a professional associate. Today, I think the word is collaboration. We've been collaborating since 1946. People just changed the word on it. Speaking of that bank in National Bank, my dad believed that if he owed a man $1, he paid him. And he also believed if a man owed him $1, he'd go pick it up. He didn't ask him to put it in the mail because it's slow, you know that. He would go pick it up. When Dad came out of the military, he had to borrow $1,000. And he made sure that he paid that back out of every check before he got a check to that particular bank. That tell you something? He didn't believe in credit. He told me, he said, pay the bills before they're due. That way they can never come back at you. We still practice that at this particular time. I think that's enough about the childhood. I think I've gotten most of the things. If you have some questions later on, I hope you ask them. But I have to say this. Anthony, you asked about the military. Dad got called in 1944 with Mr. Preston. Some of you know Mr. Preston. Fred Aaroner and one other gentleman that I don't remember his name. And Dad ended up in the Navy. Lewis ended up in the Army with the engineering battalion. Lewis Jr. ended up in the Navy. So we have 3 people that have served in the military in our house. There was a question that was also asked in this questionnaire that I deal with, and I saved specifically to the end. I was asked the question, what was the difference between black and white? I'm going to tell you truthfully, in the beginning, I didn't know. All I know is I went to a different church, a different movie, and a different school. I always ate up at Bob Barnes, so I didn't know anything any different, if you understand what I'm saying. And I was asked the question, how do you address people? I address people as Mr. and Mrs., like we were talking about in the family, making difference who they are. Where I was on Shrewsbury Street, on the side of me was a person of African American status, as we say it today. Her name was Mama Sally. I cut her grass. I took my wagon and brought her groceries from the A&P across the tracks over there, the same as I did for Mrs. Kellenberger, who happened to be German, who was beside us. And I also didn't get paid for picking up bottles that the wine heads left around where her daughter made house pop. You all know what house pop is? Homebrew. I think to pay for that, my dad periodically got a bottle of it. But in reality, Charleston is a different city. I've been all over the world. I'm not here to tell you about my travels, but I've been all over the world. And I have a lot to be grateful for, and that's the reason that I said the village, the village. This is a village. Enough of that. Here's my full daytime job now. It's up here on the screen, and I think I can get this to work. I've got some stuff up here, and I'm going to say that you are the people that I'm selling to if I were out after a project. The other thing that I want to tell you, I'm going to show you some projects on here that are megabuck projects. Very, very large projects. Don't leave here and say Smoot built the Washington D.C. Convention Center, because we didn't. But we were fortunate enough to be one of 2 people that managed the construction in that project. And I'm not one, and Ed and these guys over here will attest to this, that goes around saying this job costs this amount of money. I will not talk to the press about that. I don't talk to anybody, because most people get it wrong. But I will tell you that that job cost $600 million. And the guy said to me, he said, how big was your piece? I said, well, I had 20%. That's what they asked me, what could I take? What could I manage? And I told him 20% of the job. We didn't know it was going to cost that much money to start with, because the plans had not been completed. The guy told me, he said, wow, you only had 20%. I said, do you know what 20% of $600 million is? So I didn't have that problem anymore. And people get the wrong impression. That includes a lot of things. That was the cost of the project. It wasn't necessarily the cost of my part. But this is what we use in our opening when we go out and visit clients. So I thought I would put some things in here. The mission statement of our company is to create value for our shareholders, professional development opportunities for our employees, by promoting a profitable growth, continued improvements in quality, customer service, and operational procedures. See, building is a game you play with excellence and with experience. And that I can say we do have some of that. That is, and you will see it later, those were the original 4 Smoot brothers of Smoot Construction, or Smoot brothers at that particular time. That was in 1928 in a place called Boone County, West Virginia. This is my dad, Sherman Smoot, and this is St. Anthony Church in Charleston, West Virginia. That was his largest job, his most proud moment in winning that job, and he talked about it all the time, and that was one of the things he decided. In order to grow the company, he couldn't grow it to the extent that he thought he could in Charleston, and he moved to Columbus, Ohio. Here's our real history. Smoot Brothers, I showed you a picture of them, 1928, Boone County, West Virginia. Would you say it's a long way from Boone County, isn't it? 1944 to 1946, Dad got drafted along with the other gentleman that I talked about, went off to the Navy. In 46, he came back, and believe it or not, he got a workers' compensation certificate on January the 1st. I thought those type of offices were closed on January 1st. And Dad had a policy, he said, I don't care if it was closed or wasn't closed. We're going to work every January 1st after this. And to this day, and I'm 82 years old, to be in August, I work every January the 1st, whether it's my office at the house or I go to the office. It's just standard operating procedure, and my son has taken it up as doing that too. You know, people have things like that that they do, and that's one of them that we do. In 1956, he moved to Columbus, Ohio. We established presence in Washington, D.C. in 1967. 72, the business then expanded into general contracting. 1991, we opened in Indianapolis. Our areas today include Ohio, D.C., Indiana, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Maryland, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and we're registered to do business in Texas, but we don't put it up there. Guiding principles. It's not the way we've constructed our buildings that distinguishes our company. It's the manner in which we've constructed our business. A business formed not by the characteristics of our projects, but by the character of our people. Our services that we provide, general contracting, which you get a general contractor, he does it all. Construction management is professional construction management. We manage the large jobs. Construction management of risk is a new type where you manage those large jobs. The architect comes under your control, generally speaking, and you're at risk for them. And that makes Carson Agency happy if I could get a job for $600 million, because it'd be a nice fee with that, right? There won't be any of those. Design build, where we take it all and we tell the client we will do it for X if that's what his budget is. And then program management, that's when we get involved with people in the very beginning. Before they say, I want all of this around, we tell them how much it's going to cost. That's really program management, to keep people on track, on budget, so that they don't have an uh-oh at the end. That's what a managing contractor does. The measure of our accomplishments, these are the things, these are those pictures that I told you about. So I've got a few of them up here and I've got them subdivided. I hope you enjoy them. These are a series of schools in all three of our urban markets. In Columbus, we had the total program of all the schools there until they couldn't pass their bond issue and pay for it, so we had to terminate that relationship. IPS is Indianapolis Public Schools. We did a number of schools there, and we've also done a number of schools in Washington, D.C., and you will see some of those as we go through this. But the reason that slide is up there as it is, that represents all three of the offices, and in the last 10 years, we have probably built 75 schools. 50 of those were in Columbus. Air traffic control towers. This one right here in Columbus, Ohio, when I went up on that bad boy at 286 feet, and it's got a walkway around it, and you can look all the way down at the ground. I thought I was pretty good, but I was holding on to that rail all the way around. And anyhow, it was a good experience to be able to take people up around that. That was with the Department of the Federal Aviation, I forget exactly what they were called. That was our first one. Our second one was in Indianapolis, then one in Washington, D.C., one at Newport News. We just completed one at Fort Drum, New York, and that crew moved down to Columbus, Ohio, at Rickenbacker, and we're building an air traffic control tower. The reason we have been successful with those, they know us, we know their system, we know how it works, and gives us a little bit of an edge. You don't always have to be just the lowest bidder. Oh, and those towers were from all three of our offices. This is Columbus. This is one of our proudest moments, the Ohio State House. It was a wreck when we got it. It was, I don't know, 100 years old or whatever it was. Had ceilings that had been dropped, walls that had been moved. We restored this. This was done by Smoot by himself as a construction manager, and we won the job in a competitive arena, and we're very proud of that particular project. It enabled us to get another project that I'll show you. This is the apartments building in Columbus. This material on here is Georgia marble on this stone, on this building, and they begin to come off. You have a lot of that going on in Washington at the present time because the anchoring systems that they use to hold the stone to the steel or to the concrete eroded and rusted, and after the natural vibration of the earth, they started coming loose like that, which had been hazardous to people. We took all those stones off, relabeled them, bought new stones where required, and put them back on. That is now the Supreme Court for the state of Ohio. That is the Ohio State University Union, if any of you have ever been there. It's one of the larger unions. And when we got that job and we bid that job, it was a happy day for Smoot because we'd never been able to get a job of that magnitude at the university. So we're very pleased about it. This is Port Columbus. It was a 5-gate expansion that we were able to, if you've ever been at Columbus, this is the drive going up to the main off-ramp. And all of these on this side was what we did. Never could get a very good shot of that, but it's our experience in aviation. That's one of them. Baker Student Center, Ohio University. Anybody been up to Ohio University to see this? Have you seen it? That is another proud moment. We won that competitively in a competitive bid simply because of our experience that we had up at Ohio State. That's one of the dormitories at Ohio University. This is Central States University's new union. This is as it's to look when it's finished. Right now it's under construction, and I didn't allow them enough time to give you a construction photograph of it, but that's Central States Union. So you see that's 3 unions that I've showed you. We've sort of got a portfolio of those that makes it easier to explain to new people that we have the experience. Parks Hall Biological Science Lab. This is what I told you. We don't always do everything. This is when we were just doing masonry. This was a few years back. We decided that we would bid the masonry on that particular job, and we won it. But the concrete, the electrician, that was somebody else's work. This is a parking garage on Livingston Avenue across from Children's Hospital. That was completely a Smoot job recently completed. This is the psychology building at Ohio State University, a project that we did as a construction manager. This is the graduate student housing at Ohio State University. That's the new Children's Hospital in Columbus. Now, One of the things that I do on all of my our photographs, I always give credit to the person if it was a joint venture. I always put the other person's name. I don't want anybody to think we built this building by ourselves. I'm proud to say that our people were the last people off the job simply because we had a better interior finishing crew to manage it than our partner did. And we've done a lot of work with Turner. They're a very good company. This is the casino in Columbus. That's the only picture they would let us use. They didn't want anybody taking their pictures. They just wanted you to come in and ding dong, ding dong, ding. So Jenny and I don't go there anymore. But realistically, a great job for us. For the experience. We had one that preceded that I'll show you a picture of that was a little bit different. But that job was a very large job, and it was built in 18 months, complete. That is a picture of Rivers Casino in Pittsburgh, in which there was a contractor on this job, and they knew about our experience with casinos, and there's been more than just that one that you saw, and called us and said, would you come up and give us a price on it? We gave them a price. It was close to the one that they had, but we realized that that was just a price that we gave them. We didn't have the people to be able to do it, and we joint ventured with the Pennsylvania contractor. That has been our Columbus experience. This is our Washington D.C. experience. Union Station, we had 45% of the construction management on that. And very proud moment of our historical folder of jobs that we have brought back to the original standard. That's that D.C. Convention Center that I'm talking about, that's 6 city blocks. It's about 80 feet in the ground. I beg your pardon, about 40 feet in the ground. This is a joint venture with Balfour Beatty. Let me go back to this one. Joint venture with Clark Construction, a contractor in, a little story for you. When I first went to Washington in the early days, people accused me of being sponsored by Pepsi. Can you imagine Pepsi-Cola sponsoring a masonry contractor? It was because we could figure jobs, we could estimate jobs, and we could build jobs. They said, somebody got to be behind it. Somebody's behind it. If you do what's right, right will come back to you. That's what I was always taught. That was the large one I was talking about. This one is Balfour Beatty. This is the National Gallery of Art, Pennsylvania Avenue. It was this wall, they have stones here about that wide. The anchors that held them back in the wall rusted, and they started falling off. We took them all off because we had experience with another building, brought them to Columbus, showed them that, we won the job. Very outstanding job for us. That is one of the buildings on the mall. And all those buildings have a center that is empty, just like this room. It's a good example of this room. We built a building inside that room while all of this was occupied. And we built it by lifting everything over. I don't talk too much about that. It was what we call a fixed dollar job, and I contributed a little bit out of the till to that job. You understand that, don't you? But anyhow, it was a great job, and people ask me, what is this? It's called the infill court, and that's one of the lights. They're up on top, skylights. They're on top of the roof so that you can let air inside the building, air and light. Dunbar School, Washington, D.C. One of the original African-American schools that has been completely redone and built. Won a number of contracts. This says it is a joint venture with Gilbane Building Construction. It is our first project that we had the 51% and they had the 49%. What isn't up here is another project called Roosevelt School, approximately the same size, just a little bit larger than what Dunbar was. It's also Smoot Gilbane. And there's 2 jobs in Columbus that are coming up that are going Smoot Gilbane. It takes a long time to develop the experience and to be able to go to an owner and convince him, I'm the lead because we're the local contractor that pays our taxes in Columbus, Ohio. No disrespect, but they're in Providence, Rhode Island. I don't know where Turner is now. New York, Dallas, wherever. So people tell stories about me, I tell stories about them, but the stories I tell are true. Do you understand what I'm saying? Local. Everybody's saying buy local. Local produce, local construction contractors, etc. Dunbar has also won quite a few Craftsman Award. That, if you saw something called 60 Minutes on Sunday, you saw that building. And it's my understanding that when they rolled the cameras, the only thing they saw of the sign up there, you see Clark up there? Well, it's Clark. It's a joint venture with Clark and Russell. What was left out was Smoot. We took that out of there. But in reality, when they had showed that on 60 Minutes about this is the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. And we're very, very blessed to be a part of that. It's a 3-way contract. I think I have one more. There is some of the lifting devices that we had to use. What that is, we called it the coffin. Does anyone know what that is, that big white up there? That's the Pullman car. Whatever the historical Pullman car is, it's been completely restored. It's in shrink wrap, and we had to pick that up. Jenny, how far did we drop it? Down in the ground, Jenny? How deep was that? Jenny was out there looking and bending over and had her hands on the fence like that. I didn't push her though. Looking down. It's 90 feet in the ground, and the room has built around it to protect it. Folks, I'm just about through here. Historical renovation, again, that's a Georgetown library, won a gold award. Stony Point Fashion Mall, Richmond, Virginia. That's the other job in Washington, D.C. that I can't talk about, but you know what it is. I'm forbidden to talk about it. I'm forbidden to even go up there because I haven't been cleared. I can say this is scaffold, and it's all the way around the dome. And maybe when we get done with that, it'll look close to one right next door here. It'll be that color. Bottom line, it was lead-based paint. They had to get rid of it, and we had to dispose of the hazardous material. Indianapolis, I'm going to do this real quick. We built the Caesars Hotel at Elizabeth City, Indiana. It's 503 rooms, and a 3,000 car parking garage went with that. It was great for us. You know, that was funny too. Indiana, when I went to Indiana, one of the reasons that we got to go over there, they said the mayor's name was Steve Goldsmith. Steve Goldsmith was the privatization mayor. He believed that the private sector could do everything better than the public sector could. And he asked me, he said, what can you do? I said, imagine a traveler's umbrella. You know, everybody's putting up the traveler's umbrella. I said, under every one of those times is your projects. But somebody's got to be back here holding them and managing them. I said, you got a runaway position. The architects weren't being scrutinized, and the people they were giving the projects weren't bidding them. So we changed that for him. He lost 25% of his staff in that department. We got blackballed, et cetera. People didn't like it and were writing negative comments, but nevertheless, we prevailed. When this came up, they asked Steve, we need some minority participation. You all have heard of that. Everybody's looking for minority contractors, saying we ain't got none. He didn't try hard enough, because every job we have our quota and more. But the word is not minority anymore, it's called inclusion. It's all of God's children, all of them. This one, they were looking for the best minority contractor they could get. When they cut the ribbon, I'm pleased to say, they said, that's who we were looking for, and instead, we got the best contractor that we could have gotten, who got it done on time, on budget, and got our inclusion. They said minority contractors. But I'm beginning to hear more and more everywhere I go. The word is going to be inclusion. Everybody wants to be treated the same, and everybody should be treated the same. And we should have had an opportunity to join the union many years ago, but we didn't, and we still made it because somebody told us, go to Columbus, Ohio. I don't know. I'll show you a couple more slides here. Purdue Engineering, that's the aeronautical engineering building. We were very proud of that. It was a competitively bid job, and we were less than 1% difference between us and the second bidder. So when that happens, usually you got the good price. This is another job that we took over in Indianapolis. That was their library, and it belonged to somebody else, and they didn't get the job done. And when they did some testing, they were thrown off the job. They called us, said, we need you out there. I said, yeah, but it's too big for me. So we got Hunt Construction, and we did it together. That's joint venture with Hunt Construction. That's Conseco Field House, where they play their basketball games. That is something we're very proud of. That's the Indianapolis Airport. That also was with joint venture with Hunt Construction. Our responsibility was not the B1 that you see looking like that, but there are two wings that go on either side of that, and our responsibility was to get them built and erected. Lucas Oil Stadium, where the Buckeyes won the championship. We were very much a part of that job, and again, our people were the last people coming off. That is Eskenazi Hospital. I hate to tell you how much it cost, but it was a big one. Began with a B. There were 7 contractors who managed that. We were fortunate enough to be one of those contractors. We had 13 people on that job for 3 years. And why do I like that? When you do professional management services, whatever you pay the individual, you get a multiplier of 2. So if you make $100,000 a year, they pay me $200,000 a year, covers my overhead, profit, and fees. And you don't lose money on it. Hope 6, I don't know if anybody in here knows what Hope 6, but it's a program they have in housing. This was a project in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We were asked to come down and finish 225 houses. They're done. They're livable and look like any street USA. And it still looks that way today. Closing. The lessons of the past are the blueprint of the future. Today, we are action people, committed, involved, and committed to client satisfaction. And tomorrow, the measure of your idea will see to its successful completion. I appreciate you putting up with me for an hour. I think I'm supposed to say, if we have any questions of me, I'll be glad to answer anything that you have. I must have talked too much. There's one gentleman right there. Yes, sir.
you have your in-house architectural services?
We have inside?
Do you have in-house architectural services?
No, sir, we don't. I figured that. Your partner said, you can get it if you want it. The other gentleman.
When is the scheduled completion of the African American History Museum?
Soft opening will be probably between May and June of next year.
2016.
Yeah.
It's separate from the Smithsonian?
Is it separate? It's on the grounds of the Smithsonian.
It's not part of the
it's-
Smithsonian. It is part of the,
It's a separate building.
well, there was a building there.
Is it part of the Smithsonian complex?
It's on the grounds of the Smithsonian, yes. It's diagonally right across from, I don't know if you saw it or not, but it's diagonally across from the tower. That was a good question. I don't know if you're saying, is it going to be run by the Smithsonian? Yes. That's who we work for, them and the architect of the Capitol.
Last time we were up there was already, I thought, an African-American museum. It was part of the Smithsonian.
If it was it on the other side?
It's in Southeast, it's a little different.
It's a little
Yeah.
different, yeah.
Yeah, it's different.
Places.
I think that's the African Museum, not African American.
Yeah, it's a museum.
Probably
Museum of
is,
African
Jenny.
History,
Yeah. Specifically if it was on the other
You
side.
know, we talked about the busing and fussing versus Ferguson and all that, Brown versus the Board of Education.
And if there are no other questions,
One back here. I just wanted to make a comment. I had always heard, my father had always told stories about the Smoot brothers. And in fact, his father had told he and his brothers, my understanding was, this is one of them here, that they all needed to learn a trade. One should go into masonry, one should go into carpentry, and one should go into all these different things, and that they should become builders themselves. Well, they didn't listen to that. They did their own, went their own way. But he had always spoken very highly of the Smoot family, and when we had been in Ohio, he would show me buildings and so forth. And that was, I think the last time he mentioned something about Smoot, I may have been like 12 years old or something. So I had been living in D.C. and recently moved back in 2012, but before then, he had come to visit. He was seeing some doctors in D.C. And we were coming down past 9th Street, and he sees a sign that says Smoot Construction, and he almost lost his mind. He almost lost his mind. He's like, that's got to be Smoot Brothers. That's got to be the Smoot Brothers. And he went through the whole stories all over again. And it was so funny because later, I think I saw an article that referenced, yes, there was the Smoot Brothers, and that you all had a portion of that contract for the convention center. And
Right.
it is beautiful. I've been there. Very excellent work, and just want to applaud you. And
Thank you.
just wanted to mention that.
Let me say, also you need to know, and I don't know exactly how to say that, but the steel that is beneath that building, it had 2 steel companies completely tied up for almost a year, and the person in charge of that was with us, that was part of what we were doing, and it happened to be a female engineer who graduated from Penn State. So when we say inclusion, it's all the way around. When my dad and his brothers went to West Virginia State, they all took masonry. I think at that particular time it was called West Virginia Collegiate Institute. Yeah. Actually, what happened is when you finished 11th grade in Boone County, they shipped you down here and you got your next degree from West Virginia State. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, internally, when I think about what you all have done as a family over the years, these poor little folks out of West Virginia, bricklayers who actually now have put their mark on the world through a time when segregation, all the negative things. How did you do it? What kept you going internally? And you all have done a lot of creative stuff around building and stuff too, in terms of helping things happen. So what happened? How did you vision that and keep yourselves going through these strange times? You didn't have role models, as I think about it.
We had a very strong family. And that family, when we talk about it today, when we have people, nobody works for us. They work with us. That is the family, the strength. How can I go out and do something if I got 100 people back there that are depending on getting a check? It bothers me, bothers Jenny. She gets tired of riding on the weekend, going out looking at jobs. She gets tired of hearing at dinner, oh, this person or that person. But we know when our people are sick. We know when they have children, et cetera, et cetera. That is the momentum, I think, that keeps us going as a family business. And the other thing is, we don't get paid. We, as the family, do not get paid until everybody else gets their bonus. And people know that. I don't even know where the checkbook is. I'm being honest. Press used to sign the checks, but he didn't sign the main checkbook. Press didn't know where it was. We had somebody that did that we trusted. And when you have those type of people, you got to try to do it. And it becomes difficult at sometimes because it gets in the way of what I should be doing. Sometimes I shouldn't go as far as I do. Thank you for saying it.
Question.
Yes, sir.
When you all left Charleston, West Virginia, how many employees did you take with you?
You know, we tried to figure that out. The Harristons, Leon and Fred. Shorty, everybody knows Shorty James Isabel.
Yeah.
Son Jones.
Son Jones.
Mosley.
Emmanuel Robertson. The Rush brothers.
And Boone County, they had to get a bus to take all them up there.
Bush boys.
The Bush boys came. And what happened, they were looking for jobs too, so everybody came to Columbus. And we employed as many, for the first 9 or 10 years, we really didn't start masonry, beyond masonry, until in the 70s, I think it was. But we had some huge crews. But here again, you have that responsibility. And I mean it very sincerely.
Showed up at church too.
Yeah. And Friday night we played Bid West, man. Yes, sir.
Yes. Your reach, you will never really understand the depth and length of your reach. I'm the son of Buster Smith, who was a bricklayer for your dad back in the 40s. What you did for my dad, as your dad did for my dad as a young man, has done many, many good things for me and my family. So the long reach is long. Never think that it ended years ago, because we are still alive. We're doing things that your father and my father and Reef and the family started many, many years ago, and it's not dead.
Well, Press and I talked, and we tried to figure out everybody, and we said, we can't do it. And you know what the fear was? That we'd leave somebody's name out, and it concerned us. And I tried, Jenny tried to come up with names and whatnot, and she said, we better use the bigger picture, everybody. And there was a lot of people that left Charleston and the greater area and found a better life, realistically. I'm not saying that they didn't have a good life here, but it's like they walked up to the next platform in the stairs and found something that they didn't have. And, you know, we were blessed that we were led in that direction. But we were still able to maintain some of the roots of the oak tree back in Charleston. And we're pleased about that. I'll tell you one other thing. When we were talking, and this is about Jenny and I, we were going to get married before we finished school. We got married after we finished school, and guess who put their feet down? It wasn't only her mother, my dad, everybody. Oh no, y'all gonna finish school. Yeah, you need some help, but you gonna finish school. I couldn't wait. What time did we get married, Jenny?
11 o'clock in the morning.
And then I graduated. And then we went to night. Then we had some chicken down at the famous chicken place. And then we got to go to Niagara Falls and come back and go to Stockton to try to build that hospital. But it's been good, and I want you all to know we've been very blessed as a family to be able to do what we do. And I'm sure that the next generation, we think our grandson and our sons are doing a good job as far as picking it up. Picking it up. They didn't go as fast as I would like for them to go. But, you know, I didn't holler upstairs and say, "You going to work, boy." What we did is we gave them 3 choices. When you graduate from high school, you can go to the school and we'll pay the tuition. You can go to the military or you can get your butt out. We had one that chose it in reverse. He now has 3 degrees. He's an officer with the company. The second one said, "I'm not going to the military." He was just against going to the military. And he left. He's got his degree, and he also has his real estate license. The third one decided he wanted to sing, and he's now the artistic music director for Ravinia, which is a large outdoor festival in Chicago. He also is the paid cantor for Holy Name Cathedral. Been up there 17 or 18 years, one. But anyhow, they listened, but I didn't have the influence or whatever the case. And realistically what it was, I couldn't overcome the street. I'm sorry, but you got to recognize when you have your offspring, they're a little bit of you, a little bit of your wife, and they're a little bit themselves and the street. And Jenny and I recognize that. So, you guys have been gracious with your time, and I thank you for the opportunity to show you. When I start showing those pictures, yeah.
I certainly appreciate you being here. But
He's got the mic. He's got the mic on him.
I certainly appreciate you all being here. Can you hear me?
No. I think he's coming there.
All right, I got that. I said I certainly appreciate you all being here.
Can I say one other thing? I took too much of your time, but when you go home, I want you to do something. Get on your computer and pull up "I Believe," written by your ex-governor, John D. Rockefeller. Read "I Believe." It fits you to a T about what's going on in the world today, how people are being treated, etc. I just couldn't take any more of your time, but it's worthwhile reading. I put it in plastic because my mother gave it to us, my dad, and myself, and said, "Hang this in your office, and don't forget a word that he said on it." John D. Rockefeller Jr., "I Believe."
Mr. Smoot, I would just like to say that I just admire you for the beautiful wife you chose.
Give him the mic back for a second.
In a few days, we will have been married 58 years. 59. No. Anyhow, it's tough. It's been a long time.
God bless you all.
Well, she's had her hands full with me, I know that.
Well, again, I want to appreciate your attendance, your patience, but what I want to make you aware of is that there are younger generations of men and women, married and unmarried, sons and daughters, that have to understand what their history is. And they'll never know if we don't teach it to them. They won't grow into the individuals that they need to be unless they're taught how to be that individual. And we can't continue letting them go on not being taught. So as my dad used to do sometimes, would grab me by the neck and say, bring your ass here. Or my mama would take me and do a few other things with me when I messed up. I'm sure, as I've heard, you all felt the same thing. I don't suggest that you do that to the young men and the young women that are out there acting up, but teach them how to be young men and young women. Respect who they should be respecting, and they'll get the respect that they deserve. We have a long history with each other, no matter who you are or where you are. It has to be preserved and respected by the other person. There's been a guy who was in the legislature for years when I came to Charleston in '76. His name was Porter Cotton. As I got to know his family, Doris, his wife, Dolores, who passed away just recently. I was at her funeral in Chesapeake, and one of the preachers who eulogized her got up, and the first thing he said, which brought me back to, which made me think about this period right now. The first thing he said was, when he moved to Chesapeake, he walked down a sidewalk, and Miss Cotton would give him the eye. And I said to myself, that's what I'm talking about. All the people have to do is look at you a certain way. Or, I know your parents, boy, so don't mess up out here. Or, I've got my eye on you. That's the community that we all share. And that's the community that I want you, or we, share with the younger men and younger women and teach them how to be respectful to others. But what I'd like to do right now is call my buddy Press back up here for a second, because we've established a tradition with our 2-year block speaker series. And it'll continue until we cannot do it anymore. But what we have is what I'm doing is getting our governor involved in what we're doing here and recognizing the picture that we're presenting here. Historic pictures revealing how we were brought up and how we were taught. And recognizing that fact is in a, Mr. Smoot, would you step up here too, please? And recognizing that fact in a certificate presenting to our particular speakers. So if you would read that, Press, I'd appreciate it.
This is from the state of West Virginia, Earl Ray Tomlin. Whereas Louis Smoot Sr. graduated from Garnet High School in Charleston, West Virginia, received a Bachelor of Science degree from Michigan State University and honorary doctorate degrees from Ohio Dominican University, Franklin University, and the Army Corps of Engineers. And whereas Louis R. Smoot Sr. became president of the Smoot Corporation in 1959 and currently serves as chairman and chief executive officer And whereas Louis R. Smoot Sr. has had a long and distinguished career in the construction industry, and has been involved in community service in Central Ohio, at Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. And whereas Louis R. Smoot Sr. served in various capacities as a trustee on the board of directors with many organizations or foundations, and has received numerous awards for outstanding contributions to his community. And whereas Louis R. Smoot Sr. is a man of great character and has shown a true dedication and commitment to his community and career that is a great example to all of us. And whereas I, Earl Ray Tomlin, Governor of the state of West Virginia, do hereby bestow upon Louis R. Smoot Sr. this certificate of recognition. Now, I can't read this little one.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And come back June 25th for Mr. Ronald Newsom, who will talk about his passing of his father, Reverend Moses Newsom, and his mother, who just recently passed away herself, Ruth. I'm sure it'll be just as interesting as other presenters that we're having. And also in July, let me mention as well, Rabbit Jones will be here talking about his historic music industry. In August, someone you're quite familiar with as well, Mr. Richard Bunny Payne will be here to talk about his experiences going to Garnet and his living around in Charleston. So we have a quite schedule going on for the summer. Bring in some younger people with you. They can experience what's going on and learn from you what they need to know. Thanks a lot, and good night to everybody.